There are years that move slowly, and years that change everything at once. 1965 didn't just move, it shifted the ground beneath rock and roll. Old sounds were fading, new ideas were exploding, and young artists were stepping into the spotlight with a confidence the world had never seen. If you lived through even a piece of it, this journey might feel like coming home. Behind the dark glasses and haunting voice was a man who loved speed. Roy Orbison, posing with his go-kart in 1965, is a rare glimpse of joy before tragedy reshaped his life. He wasn't just a balladeer, he was a thrill-seeker at heart, still chasing light before the shadows arrived. And in another corner of England, a future legend was beginning his own unlikely journey. Here are the Rockin' Vickers, a name most people have forgotten, except for the kid on guitar. That's Ian Kilmister, years before he became Lemmy of Motorhead. Back in 1965, he wasn't the loudest man in rock, yet. He was still learning, still wandering, still building the attitude that would define an entire subculture. And while Lemmy was finding distortion, another group was finding identity. Before they were Pink Floyd, they were an R&B cover band called the T-Set, playing cramped house parties and college gigs in 1965. Syd Barrett hadn't taken the wheel yet, not until he began writing original, eccentric songs that pushed them from bar band obscurity into the first sparks of British psychedelia. These images capture the moment before the sound changed, the quiet just before the cosmic storm. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, someone else was about to rewrite folk music forever. The Byrds didn't invent folk rock, they detonated it. Their 1965 breakthrough, Mr. Tambourine Man, was an electric jolt to the folk scene. Roger McGuinn was the only Byrd who actually played on the recording. The rest came from the legendary Wrecking Crew. But once the song hit the airwaves, everything changed. And as the Byrds took flight, California was preparing another sound that would soon sweep America. Here are the Mamas and the Papas in 1965, just as they were shaping the warm, layered harmonies that would define the California sound. California Dreamin' was still months away, but the chemistry was already there. The sunshine, the melancholy, the velvet smooth vocals that played from every radio from Los Angeles to New York. Their rise marked a softer, deeper shift in American music, even as Beatlemania kept roaring forward. Ringo on the set of Help in 1965, cheerful, chaotic, and completely unprepared for skis. The band later admitted they were stoned for the entire shoot, but somehow Ringo learned to ski in an afternoon. It was Beatlemania wrapped inside movie madness, a circus that only got bigger as the year rolled on. And while the Beatles filmed comedy, another British band was dealing with a very different challenge. The Kinks in 1965, on the brink of an American breakthrough that vanished overnight. They were banned from touring the US for 4 years after a dispute with promoters. Commercially, it was a disaster, but creatively, it forced Ray Davies to write distinctly English songs, turning him into a national treasure. And while the Kinks regrouped, another band was finding power in chaos. The Rolling Stones hitting Hamburg, 1965, and hitting it hard. The crowd went so wild that 2 days later, a show in Berlin erupted into a full riot, with the venue completely destroyed. This was the year the Stones became the dangerous band, no longer the scruffy rivals of the Beatles, but something much darker, louder, and unstoppable. And their rise set off a chain reaction all across pop culture. Bob Dylan in England during Don't Look Back. The the film that captured his final months as a pure folk singer. He was restless, uneasy, halfway between old and new. The electric guitar was waiting, the boos were waiting, the legend was waiting. And while Dylan prepared to shock the folk world, another genius on the West Coast was chasing perfection in the studio. Brian Wilson, in 1965, looked calm, but his mind was on fire. He had just quit touring to focus on studio work, building layer upon layer that would become pet sounds. While the world saw a pop star, he was quietly reinventing what a studio album could be. And as Brian reached for perfection, another British band was exploding into superstardom. The Rolling Stones, 1965. The year Satisfaction changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't just a band. They were a movement. This photo captures their defiant swagger, the moment before superstardom fully locked in. But not all icons in 1965 were angry or electrifying. Some were simply exhausted. Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr en route to San Francisco in 1965. Beatlemania had become a blur of airports, stadiums, and screaming crowds. They look relaxed here, but underneath was fatigue that would end their touring forever just a year later. Meanwhile, a future superstar was just starting his climb. A teenage Phil Collins in 1965, long before Genesis, long before stadiums. He was a child actor who appeared as an extra in A Hard Day's Night, but his heart belonged to the drums. Within a few years, that passion would lead him to answer a newspaper ad that changed his life. And across town, someone else was lighting up televisions across Britain. Mick Jagger on Ready, Steady, Go, 1965. Defiant, electric, and impossible to ignore. This was the year the Stones became the face of youthful rebellion. Every weekend, teenagers turned on the TV to see what trouble Mick was going to cause next. But he wasn't the only one setting off fireworks on British television. The Who on Ready, Steady, Go, 1965. The epicenter of the mod revolution. My Generation wasn't just a song, it was a declaration. Their chaotic, instrument-smashing performances rewrote the rules of live TV and terrified the older generation. And in Greenwich Village, another young songwriter was preparing to rewrite something far bigger. Bob Dylan with John Sebastian in Greenwich Village, 1965. A calm moment before the storm. Within months, Dylan would release Like a Rolling Stone, go electric at Newport, and ignite one of the biggest cultural divides in music history. And as folk and rock collided, California prepared its own answer. The Byrds on The Ed Sullivan Show, 1965. The moment folk rock conquered America. Their jangling 12-string guitars and Dylan's lyrics fused into a sound that defined the decade. And while the Byrds soared, a young London musician was just beginning to shape his identity. A young David Jones in 1965, before he became David Bowie. He was searching for a voice, an image, a direction. Nobody looking at this photo could have predicted the transformations ahead, but 1965 was the year the spark first appeared. And while Bowie searched for himself, two familiar faces were building a partnership that would last a lifetime. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards in 1965, captured in Charlie Is My Darling. Their partnership was exploding creatively, the Glimmer Twins becoming the force that would drive the Stones for decades. And as British rock tightened its grip, one Beatle found a new path far from the noise. George Harrison and Ringo Starr in the Bahamas filming Help in 1965. Amid the chaos, George was introduced for the first time to Indian music, a moment that quietly changed the Beatles and shaped the sound of the coming years. It was a peaceful discovery in a year full of noise. 1965 wasn't just a step forward, it was a turning point. The sounds grew bolder, the ideas grew stranger, and the artists who defined the decade took their first real leaps into the unknown. If this year brought back memories, wait until you see what came next. Because 1966 didn't evolve gently, it arrived with a spark.